The room smelled like sugared lemon and cheap perfume. That was the first thing I noticed when I walked in, how the air was sweet in a way that made my teeth ache, like overripe frosting. Someone had lit a vanilla-scented candle on the drinks table, and the sugar from the cupcake towers was already melting slightly in the late April sun. A garland of drooping pink paper flowers hung unevenly above the folding chairs. Cheap rental linens bunched at the corners of the buffet, and somewhere beneath all of it, the satin, the laughter, the clink of plastic champagne flutes, was the scratch of paper. Turning. Slowly. My name is Harper. I'm 29 years old, and this is how my sister tried to rewrite my life in front of everyone I knew, and how I made sure she read her own ending instead. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. I didn't even realize it was my diary until she smiled. She was sitting at the head of the room, pink satin sash over one shoulder that said bride-to-be, a silver tiara half twisted in her curls, like someone had tried too hard to make her look effortless. Her laugh came a beat too high, like she'd been rehearsing it. The sunlight caught on the rhinestones of her dress and fractured across the mirror behind her, scattering pale shards of light onto the ceiling. Her fiancé, Jason, sat just behind her in the corner. Khakis too stiff, shoulders too tight for the afternoon crowd of wine-tipsy friends and old aunts. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at me. My stomach dropped before I could place why, and then she held it up. Leather-bound, deep green, the corners slightly frayed from years of being shoved into drawers and nightstands. I felt my chest tighten the second her thumb pressed the spine open. It was mine. She didn't say my name, not at first. She just cleared her throat and glanced around the room like she was about to give a toast. Then she looked straight at me. "You used to write such beautiful things," she said, her voice syrupy, mock sentimental. "Do you remember this one, Harp?" Her tone was theatrical, the kind of false sweetness that draws in an audience. The aunts leaned forward, hands folded around stemless glasses. Someone's phone camera rose discreetly. The first line she read wasn't even that scandalous. A journal entry from years ago, something about a guy at work who wore too much cologne and made awkward jokes, but her tone turned it into something it wasn't. She read it slow, savoring it like it was comedy or ammunition. A few people laughed. Not everyone, but enough. The air changed. It's the kind of shift that never makes it to film. Too subtle, too human. It's in the way conversations lower without anyone agreeing to, in how someone reaches for another mini quiche and then stops halfway. It's in the new distance between laughter and silence. I didn't move. My hands stayed folded in my lap, nails pressed into the fabric of my dress until half moons bloomed against my palms. I could feel Jason watching me. His eyes were steady, unreadable, but when she turned the page, that sharp, surgical sound of paper on paper, something in his face changed. It went still and cold, like the color had been drained out of him in an instant. That's when he stood up. Not a word. Just the chair sliding back with a slow scrape, rubber legs sighing against the tile. His jaw was tight, but he didn't say anything. He just stood, hands by his sides, eyes on the floor like someone had called his name in a church. And in that second, I knew it was working, because this wasn't a real betrayal. It was bait. A trap I'd been setting for weeks. But before I tell you how I got there, how I made sure my sister would walk herself into a public unraveling, you need to understand how we ended up here, how that diary ended up in her hands, and why it had to happen this way. My sister, Melanie, was always louder than me, not just in volume, though she had a voice that could slice through drywall, but in presence. She was the kind of person who walked into a room and made the air rearrange itself. She didn't wait to be introduced. She announced. She told a story, even if it wasn't hers. She took the credit before anyone else realized there was some to take. Growing up in a small Georgia town, there wasn't much to compete over, but somehow she always found something. My Halloween costume idea? Suddenly hers. My lead in the church play? She tripped over her lines just enough to cry, so I gave it to her. Even the boy I liked in 10th grade, she didn't even want him, but she made sure he didn't want me either. It wasn't hatred. That's the hard part to explain. It was something quieter, something meaner. She always needed to be the better version of me, even if she had to steal the blueprint. Our mother used to say we were two sides of the same coin, but Melanie always made sure hers was the shiny side facing up. By senior year, I had stopped trying to compete. I focused on grades, on saving enough to leave town. She focused on being seen. The local pageant circuit loved her. White teeth, tan shoulders, the right kind of southern charm that made old men reach for their wallets and old women sigh with envy. And me? I stayed behind the camera. I learned how to disappear gracefully. I left first, got a job in Atlanta, small PR firm, corporate clients, mid-tier budgets, beige cubicles that smelled faintly of burnt coffee. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I rented a one-bedroom near the MARTA station and bought candles I couldn't afford because the smell of my own apartment finally felt like ownership. I started writing again. Quiet things, little entries, observations, memories, confessions, nothing fancy. Just mine. Words that didn't need approval or applause. The diary started as therapy. Cheap leather cover from a Target clearance bin, pages soft as tissue. Over time, it became something like a witness. It knew me better than anyone. The parts I didn't show, the thoughts that never made it into polite conversation. And when she called me to say she was getting married, I was happy. I swear I was. Jason seemed fine, clean-cut, dry-humored, polite in that cautious Southern way. They met at some insurance seminar in Nashville. Both bored, both trying to network their way into something bigger. He was from just outside Louisville, raised Catholic, worked in underwriting. I didn't see any red flags. Not then, just a vague sense of flatness. He smiled in photos, but his eyes never joined in. I chalked it up to nerves, to the camera, to the way Melanie liked to take over a frame. Until one weekend, 2 months ago, I went to visit. That's when the first thing went missing. A folded receipt I had tucked into the back pocket of my notebook from a florist in Macon. I'd gone alone, bought one too many roses. It had meaning to me. Sentimental, maybe dumb, but I noticed it was gone. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe I'd lost it. Maybe I'd slipped it into the wrong book. But the feeling stayed. That odd, weightless panic that something private had been touched. A week later, I got a strange text from a number I didn't recognize. Just a screenshot of my own writing. One line from the diary, the name Jason circled in red. No message, just that. At first, I thought it was a prank. I stared at the screen for a long time, trying to remember if I'd ever sent those pages to anyone, if maybe I'd emailed them to myself, left them in a shared folder. But no, the diary was handwritten, always had been. Then it happened again, a different line, a reference to a night I had never told anyone about, one I had written down to forget, and that's when it clicked. Melanie had the diary. I remember sitting on my couch, the city noise seeping through the window, sirens, tires on wet asphalt, a distant train horn. And realizing what that meant. My sister had taken the one place where my life was unfiltered and decided to play God with it. I never figured out how she got it. Not exactly. I assume it was the weekend I left my bag in the guest room, unzipped. Or maybe she made a copy. Or maybe she'd had it longer than I thought, studying it the way a magician studies a mirror, looking for the angle that gives her control. But that wasn't the betrayal. The betrayal was what she chose to do with it. Because those entries, they weren't embarrassing. Not in the way she thought. They were quiet, intimate, raw. But they weren't lies. And hidden between them were hers and Jason's. They thought I didn't know. They thought I'd be humiliated. But that morning, the morning of the bridal shower, I slid something new into the diary's back pocket, a fresh page, folded once, dated carefully, the ink still drying when I slipped it in, a page she hadn't seen, one that started with a single line. Funny what people confess when they think the flowers are fake. I waited for her to read it. Jason was already standing, and the room didn't know what was coming yet, but they would, soon. The last line she read before Jason stood up wasn't even mine. That was the part I kept turning over later, like a marble in my palm, small, cold, weightless, in the wrong way. She read it like a punchline, a private moment she thought would land as a joke. But the words weren't mine. They were his. Lifted from a text message he had sent at 1:03 a.m. last month, the night Melanie thought he was at a conference in Charleston. A message that had been screenshotted, printed, and folded carefully into a page near the back of the diary, right where she would find it if she was looking for shame. I remembered the timestamp exactly, the way the numbers lined up like a code, 0103. I remembered because that was the night I couldn't sleep, the night the rain slid down my apartment windows like melted glass. Somewhere, between half dreams and half denials, my phone had lit up with a message meant for someone else. I had stared at those words until the screen dimmed itself out of mercy. And now, here they were again, my sister reading them aloud to a crowd of women clutching plastic champagne flutes, laughing at the setup without realizing the punchline was their own silence. I watched her smile falter when Jason didn't laugh with the others. Her lips stiffened. Her eyes darted toward him once, then back to the paper as if she could drag the room's attention away from whatever ghost had just crossed between them. She kept going, voice tighter now, a slight shake around the vowels. She didn't stop when he left the room. She tried to make the sound of his footsteps part of her rhythm. Louder, harder, but it only made her tremble more. The laughter got thinner, brittle at the edges. Aunt Regina coughed into her mimosa, the kind of fake cough that begs for an exit. Someone whispered something too close to the mic stand, and it made a soft feedback whine that no one adjusted. And I just sat there, still, listening to the candle crackle, to a fork drop against a plate and roll off the tablecloth, to the low hum of the ceiling fan that suddenly felt deafening, remembering. Melanie and I hadn't been close in years, but we kept up the performance. Texts on holidays, tags on Facebook, the occasional clumsy sister selfie for our mom's birthday, the kind that looked loving from a distance and awkward up close. She liked control, not closeness. She liked to be seen doing the sister thing, not actually feeling it. I knew that. I knew that when she accidentally forwarded our childhood photos to her bridal party group chat and captioned mine, her, awkward face. I knew that when she announced her engagement at my birthday brunch. Not by telling me first, but by lifting her hand mid-toast, letting the ring catch the light and everyone else's gasp. And I knew it when Jason offered to help me carry wine boxes from the car last fall and stood a little too close. His breath warm with bourbon, his eyes steady in a way that wasn't curiosity. I didn't say anything, not then, because sometimes silence holds power, and sometimes it's just a soft place to bleed. But I started keeping better records after that. Small things, a receipt here, a note there, a florist in Atlanta who mentioned they'd done a makeup apology bouquet for a Jason with an out-of-state card. A voicemail left accidentally by one of her bridesmaids that included the phrase, "Wait, you mean Harper doesn't know?" At first, it just made me sick. Then it made me sharp. The idea came slowly, not like a plan, but like weather. A shift in pressure, a new stillness in the air. I realized if she was going to use my words, I could write the ending. I sent a text to Amber, one of her bridesmaids and an old classmate of mine, the kind of girl who still posted Bible verses under photos of her mimosas. Me. Hey, weird question. Did Melanie mention anything about my journal? She didn't reply at first. I watched the typing bubble appear and vanish twice. Then 2 hours later, Amber. I didn't know it was yours. I waited. I let the 3 dots return on their own. Amber. She said it was from a writing workshop, that it was fiction. Another pause. Amber. Is it not? I sent one message back. It's real. And that was all I needed. Because by then, I already had the entry that mattered. Jason had given it to me himself, not on purpose. He thought he was texting Melanie. It was the kind of message that was clearly meant to reassure someone. Soft, apologetic, meaningless. Can we talk later? I hate fighting like this. You know I didn't mean anything, but he sent it to the wrong number. Me. Wrong Harper. No reply. Just read at 11:14 p.m. And from that moment, I knew he wasn't just a passive audience to my sister's cruelty. He was in it. He was her partner in crime. Maybe more. I started calling it the entry in my head. The one I added last, folded neatly into the back of the diary the morning of the shower, sealed with a small piece of Scotch tape and the words, "Read last." I knew she wouldn't. She didn't like being told what to do. Melanie read my entries like she was holding court. Her voice rose and dipped in performative shock, like she was on stage under a spotlight only she could see. She emphasized the wrong details, a typo, a rambling sentence, never realizing the weight of what she was revealing. Because hidden inside those entries were clues, little references to the affair she never knew I had discovered. Locations, times, a scarf she had left behind in my apartment that she insisted wasn't hers, a line about a dog's bark that only made sense if you'd been to Jason's place. Every word was a breadcrumb, and she was reading them out loud to witnesses. And then there were the real entries. The ones she didn't understand at all, about how I'd forgiven her for something I never named, about how betrayal doesn't always look like a knife in the back. Sometimes it looks like a smile at brunch, about how I'd learned not to scream when I was bleeding, just to write quietly until the page turned red. Each of those lines was for me, but they were also a map, a confession disguised as reflection, a riddle only Jason could solve once he heard it, and he did. I saw it in the way he flinched when she read the sentence about the scent of his cologne on someone else's pillow. He knew the scent. He knew the pillow. He knew exactly where that line came from. Amber found me by the lemonade station after the reading. Her face was pale beneath her spray tan, mascara smudged faintly beneath one eye, the kind of detail no one else would notice, but I did. Amber, are you okay? Her voice was small, the first genuine thing I'd heard all afternoon. Me. Are you? She looked away. Her hands were shaking. She tried to set her drink down and missed the edge of the table by an inch, lemonade spilling onto the grass. Amber. She told us you were fine with it, that you gave it to her. I let the silence breathe before answering. Me. Do I look like I'm fine? Her silence said enough. Then she slipped something into my hand. A flash drive. Small, silver, warm from her palm. Amber. She left her voice memos open one night. I heard them. I recorded some, just in case. Her gaze darted around as if the plastic swans on the cupcake tower might have ears. I nodded. I didn't say thank you. Not yet. The word felt too small for what she'd just handed me. I went outside. The patio was half shaded by a white tent. Plastic streamers fluttered near the edge like tired confetti, tugged by a mild spring wind. The air smelled faintly of cut lemons, diesel from the parking lot, and something floral that came from the rented centerpieces wilting under the sun. Jason stood by a parked car, one hand on the roof, head bowed. His shadow slanted long across the gravel. I watched the pulse in his neck jump once, twice. He didn't light a cigarette, though his fingers twitched like they missed one. I didn't go to him. I watched and waited, because now the work had begun. The trap was closing in slow motion. The kind of quiet collapse that looks ordinary until you notice everyone's holding their breath. Inside, Melanie's voice rose again, brittle with denial, reading words she no longer understood. The wind carried pieces of it out to me. Some people mistake silence for weakness. My line, now her undoing. I stood at the edge of the tent, invisible in the bright afternoon light, and thought of all the ways endings can begin. Not with fire, not with shouting, sometimes with paper, and a voice that finally runs out of breath. Inside, the mood had shifted. You could feel it in the way the laughter had stopped trying to sound casual. The easy rhythm of the party was gone, replaced by a nervous sort of hush that hummed beneath the surface. The air itself felt thicker, like the humidity had doubled in a single breath. Even the cupcake towers stood untouched now, their pink frosting beginning to tilt in the heat. Delicate sugar pearls sliding down the sides like sweat. Someone had turned the music down to a whisper, an acoustic cover of some old pop song no one recognized anymore. It looped softly, a voice and a guitar that seemed to mock the silence between people. The bride-to-be sat in her chair like the air around her had turned to syrup. The diary was still open in her lap. Her fingers twitched, hovering over the page as if deciding whether to close it or turn it, to end the story or keep it going. Her tiara caught a beam of sunlight and threw it across the wall where it broke into trembling shards. I stood by the open window, let the smell of lavender from the garden fight with the plastic scent of decorations. Melting balloons, synthetic tablecloths, glue from cheap photo props. Outside, bees circled the flower beds, unaware that the world inside had stopped. And I listened. Melanie's voice had quieted. She wasn't reading now. She was flipping pages in a way that sounded like panic. Too fast, too loud. Paper slapping like palms in an argument. She was trying to find something or avoid something. I wasn't sure which. Until her voice came back, sharp, confused. Melanie, this one's not dated. The words landed like a dropped glass. I turned. The room stilled. Even the ceiling fan seemed to slow, its blades sighing through the heavy air. And then she read it. The fake entry. The one I'd written that morning. On my own stationery, in a voice just close enough to my old style to pass. The ink still smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. I'd pressed too hard with the pen. The words were slightly embossed, deliberate. But the story it told wasn't mine. It described a night. Dim light, the sound of a man's watch hitting a marble counter, a bracelet slipping off a wrist. A voice, not mine, saying, "She'll never find out." I wrote it like a memory, cinematic and cruel. I described the color of Melanie's nail polish, coral blush, chipped at the edge from nervous picking, the way she bit her lip when she lied, the faint freckle on her collarbone that only someone who'd seen her undress would know was there. I described Jason's aftershave, the same one he'd worn the last time I hugged him goodbye. Sharp, woodsy, expensive in the way he wanted people to notice. And at the end of the entry, I included a quote, his quote, lifted from the text he sent me by accident. I never wanted it to go this far. She's your sister. The silence that followed didn't belong to me. It belonged to her. I watched Melanie's jaw tighten, a pulse beating wild beneath the skin. Her eyes scanned the page again and again, like the words might rearrange themselves into a different story if she looked hard enough. But they didn't. Her breathing went shallow. The pink blush on her cheeks started to fade, leaving her skin a pale kind of gray that didn't match the glitter in her hair. Her hand shook. The diary slid forward an inch. Nobody moved. The bridesmaid stared, frozen mid-smile. A kid in the back reached for a cupcake, then slowly pulled his hand away. The sound system clicked faintly as the playlist restarted, but nobody laughed this time. Amber looked at me from across the room. She nodded once, almost invisible. Then she pulled out her phone. A single tap, and the first voice memo played. Melanie's voice, unmistakable. She still doesn't know, she said, laughing softly, the sound tinny through the tiny speaker. It's actually funny. He told me he loved me after Thanksgiving dinner, in her apartment. Then came laughter. Melanie's laughter, sharp and rising, overlapping with another woman's gasp in the background. No one moved. Jason wasn't there to see it. He had already left. But the bridesmaids were. The neighbors, our mother. Even Aunt Regina, who had always said I was too sensitive, sat with her fork paused mid-air, strawberry slice trembling on the prongs. Melanie dropped the diary. It hit the floor with a flat thud, pages fanning open like wings that would never lift again. I didn't pick it up, because in that moment, in the stunned stillness of a bridal shower decorated with dollar store favors and Pinterest lies, my sister stopped being the main character in her own story, and I didn't need to say a word. Her silence said everything, but later I did leave, quietly. The sun had dropped behind the hedges by then, the light turning soft and orange, slipping through the half-open blinds and slow bars across the wall. The air had cooled just enough for the sweat on my neck to feel like mist. The paper flowers were curling at the edges now, sagging like wilted petals. The diary lay open on the linoleum floor, its spine cracked too wide. A single page fluttered with each draft from the ceiling fan. I stepped around it, walked out into the warm Georgia air. The sky smelled of honeysuckle and exhaust. Someone was mowing a lawn 2 houses down, the hum of the engine low and steady, ordinary in a way that made everything else feel unreal. The gravel crunched under my heels. I didn't look back. That night, I lay on my bed and read the old entries again. The real ones. The ones she didn't read, the ones she didn't understand. I kept the window open. The city outside pulsed with its own kind of noise. A dog barking, a siren cutting the distance, a couple arguing faintly on a balcony. Life kept going. It always does. My fingers moved over the pages, tracing the grooves of words pressed years ago. Some letters were smudged, the ink faded by time, or tears I no longer remembered shedding. One line stuck out. She stole my story. I rewrote the ending. I read it 3 times, the rhythm of it like breathing. I didn't cry. I wasn't angry anymore, just empty. But that emptiness, it felt like space, like something new could grow there, something that belonged entirely to me. The next morning, the group chat had gone quiet. No follow-up photos, no glitter filters, no best day ever captions, just silence, punctuated by the occasional left the group notification that appeared without ceremony. Each alert blinked on my screen like a tiny admission of guilt. Melanie didn't text me. Neither did my mother, but Amber did. Amber, she's trying to spin it, said the audio was fake. Me, she always thinks she can rewrite the truth. Amber, you okay? I wasn't, not completely. My pulse still had that thin tremor, the one that hums after adrenaline drains away. But I was steady. Me, almost. Because the real reveal hadn't happened yet. The bridal shower was just the scrape of the match. What came next would be the fire. That afternoon, the sunlight poured through my blinds in thin white lines. Dust drifted through them like slow snow. I sat at my desk, laptop open, the flash drive Amber had slipped into my palm, resting between my fingers. It felt too light to hold so much damage. I hesitated before plugging it in. For a moment, I could see my reflection in the blank, black screen, tired eyes, bitten lip, a version of myself that had carried quiet anger for too long. Then I clicked play. Melanie's voice filled the room. That voice, soft, theatrical, coated in honey and self-importance, saying words that sounded like confession dressed as gossip. I heard the cruelty, the smugness, the way she framed me as a joke, her tone bending each syllable like she was arching an eyebrow through the phone. It made my hands tremble, not from rage, from validation. I wasn't imagining it, I wasn't overreacting, and now I had proof. I made a list, not out of vengeance, not at first, just structure, something to make sense of chaos. Voice memos from Amber, Jason's misfired text, screenshots of the fake work trips, the florist receipt from Macon, Melanie's fiction claim in the group chat, the voicemail from bridesmaid Sarah. The one who never deleted anything I watched, the list grow line by line, each bullet point a heartbeat of something undeniable. I stored everything in a folder, labeled it for Melanie. Not because I planned to send it, but because I needed to remember. This wasn't for revenge. It was for the truth. And the truth needed witnesses. The rehearsal dinner was the next official event. Downtown Savannah. Rented patio behind a historic inn with peeling white columns and a courtyard full of fairy lights. The evening smelled of magnolia and champagne, of rain that hadn't fallen yet. The staff lit candles in jars on each table. Gold-rimmed plates glimmered under the strings of Edison bulbs. A custom cake sat at the center, piped in glittering gold icing that read, "He put a ring on it." Everyone wore soft colors, blush, cream, light blue, a palette of innocence. The playlist was acoustic covers again, because of course it was. Ironic, considering how much of their relationship had been a cover. Melanie avoided my eyes. She worked the room like a hostess who'd memorized her lines. Air kiss here, compliment there, a laugh that sounded 1 decibel too bright. Every movement screamed control. Jason didn't show. Not at first. The guests murmured excuses for him. Traffic, work, cold feet. When he finally arrived, late and quiet, the air changed. He looked like he hadn't slept, no tie, shirt untucked at the waist, his hair a little too flat, like he'd been running his hands through it in frustration. He smiled for no one. He took his seat beside Melanie without touching her. She leaned in, kissed his cheek like a politician greeting a donor. Flashbulbs from friends' phones popped around them, freezing the image she wanted the world to see, harmony. Then she stood to give a toast. I let her speak. Let her paint the picture, the fairy tale timeline, the childhood anecdotes, the practiced tremble in her voice when she talked about finding the one. Her hand shook just enough to look human. She glanced at me twice while thanking family and friends, her smile tightening each time. She was good. I'll give her that. But I was ready. When she sat down, I stood. No clinking of glasses, no microphone. The sound of my chair scraping back was enough to hush the patio. I didn't need volume. I needed clarity. Me. Before dessert, I just want to say a few words. Melanie's eyes darted to mine. Her smile froze mid-curve. Me. I wasn't planning on speaking, but I figured, since my words were already such a hit at the bridal shower. A ripple of uneasy laughter. Forks paused. Someone exhaled too loudly. Me. I'd finished the story. Jason looked up. So did her maid of honor. Sarah's glass halted mid-air, and that's when Amber stood beside me. She didn't say much, just lifted her phone. Amber. "This is Melanie," she said, and hit play. Her voice filled the patio. She's always been jealous. If she found out about me and Jason, she'd lose it. But he kissed me first. The words drifted through the air like smoke, finding every corner, curling into every polite conversation and ending it. Gasps are real, you know. They don't just happen in movies. Someone actually gasped. A sharp intake, like glass breaking. A fork hit the floor with a metallic ring. A wine glass tipped, spilling white onto the linen. Melanie's face went white to pink to white again. Jason's face went blank. Not the blankness of guilt, but of exhaustion. Like a man who'd been carrying someone else's lie and finally dropped it. He stood, this time not in silence. Jason. Mel, you said she knew. You said it was a joke. His voice was low, even, dangerous in its calm. Melanie. Jason. Wait, don't do this here. Jason. How long were you planning to lie? Melanie. We can talk about this later. Jason. No. No more later. The space between them filled with the sound of the fountain in the courtyard, a gentle trickle that suddenly felt like thunder. He didn't look at me, just at her. Then he walked out. His footsteps echoed against the cobblestones, fading until they met the hum of passing traffic. This time, for good. Melanie stood alone, shoulders curled forward, mouth open but empty of words. The ring on her finger caught the light, but it looked too tight now, skin swelling faintly around it. Her mascara had smudged into faint gray shadows under her eyes. People avoided her gaze, suddenly fascinated by their plates. Even the waitstaff moved slower, unsure whether to clear or retreat. And I sat back down, not triumphant, not gloating, just still. The cicadas started up in the trees, that electric buzz rising over the silence. My hands rested flat on the table, steady for the first time in months. It wasn't over yet. But the end was beginning. The cake was never cut. It sat there on the banquet table like a punchline no one wanted to touch. Gold icing catching the soft glow of patio string lights, slowly sweating under the weight of its own sweetness. The piped words, "He put a ring on it," sagged just slightly, a small collapse in the frosting that felt poetic. A few people murmured goodbyes. Some slipped out early, clutching their little party favors and unfinished glasses of rosé, walking faster than politeness required. You could tell they wanted to outrun the silence that followed Jason's exit. Wanted to pretend they hadn't witnessed anything at all. The air had that heavy, embarrassed quiet that hangs after a fight in public. No one breathing too loud, no one sure where to put their eyes. Melanie stood for a long time after Jason walked out. Not moving, just frozen. Like if she didn't sit down, no one could accuse her of falling. Her bouquet, silk flowers meant for the rehearsal photos, dangled from her hand, the white ribbon dragging on the ground. Her lipstick had bled at the corners. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, visible breaths. She didn't look at me. Not that night. Not even when our mother tried to put a hand on her shoulder and she jerked away like the touch burned. The movement was small but violent, a reflex born of shame. Our mother stayed where she was, hand suspended mid-air before dropping it slowly to her side. She didn't say anything. No one did. The waitstaff began to clear the plates in silence, scraping forks gently to avoid noise. Someone turned off the speaker. The patio lights buzzed faintly. I left quietly. No eye contact, no final word. Because the story had already been told. And it wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to everyone who'd heard her voice on that recording. Everyone who now knew the diary she weaponized wasn't fiction. That the shame she tried to feed me had already been transformed into a map, a mirror, a match. The next morning, she called me. I let it ring. She called again and again. On the third try, I picked up. Her voice was thin, not angry, not even pleading, just small. Melanie, you didn't have to do it like that. I looked out the kitchen window. The early light hit everything with that soft gold only mornings know. The neighbor's hydrangeas, the porch rail, the thin steam from my coffee. Me. You're right, I could have stayed silent. Melanie, I thought you didn't care anymore. I didn't answer right away. I watched the condensation trail down my iced tea glass from the night before, still half full, still cold. A fly circled lazily by the window screen. Me. I stopped caring the way you wanted me to. That's not the same as not caring. Silence, the kind that stretches until both people start hearing their own heartbeats. Melanie, it wasn't supposed to go this far. Me, no, it wasn't. I hung up. She didn't call back. 2 days later, the wedding was officially postponed. 3 weeks after that, Jason moved out of the apartment they'd leased together in Buckhead, the one with the view of Peachtree Street and the beige curtains she'd bragged about on Instagram. His name disappeared from her Facebook. Her ring finger went bare in every photo, and by the time August rolled around, our mother had stopped bringing her up in phone calls entirely, as if she'd been erased, or maybe just paused. But I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel revenge. What I felt was quiet. Not peace, not joy, just a long exhale after holding my breath for too many years. That kind of quiet that feels like the air after a storm, heavy, clean, a little unreal. A few nights later, I opened the diary, the real one, the entries she hadn't touched, the ones I'd locked away in a fireproof box after everything happened. The metal of the latch was cold against my fingers. It clicked open like a door unsealing a past self. The pages smelled faintly of dust and candle wax. My handwriting looked smaller than I remembered. Softer. Like a version of me that hadn't hardened yet. I traced the loops of letters with my fingertip, surprised by how tender they felt. I didn't read them all. Just one. It was dated 2 years ago. The ink slightly smudged, probably from the night I wrote it half asleep, half hurt. A line I had scribbled after Melanie posted a photo of us online, that glossy filtered picture at brunch, with the caption, "Sisters by blood, besties by choice." And underneath, in my own looping cursive, I'd written, "She smiled like I was the joke. I made sure I was the punchline instead." I sat with that line a while. It didn't sting anymore. It just made sense. So I tore the page out, not out of anger, out of recognition, a kind of acknowledgement between who I was then and who I'd become. I folded it once, slipped it into a new notebook. Blank. Clean. The paper was smooth beneath my palm. The kind that whispers when you turn it. Then I took the old diary outside, set it in the fire pit, lit a match, and watched. The first flame caught fast, orange and steady. It curled around the leather cover, then found the seam where glue met paper. The smell was a mix of ink, smoke, and something strangely sweet, like burnt sugar. The fire read every word faster than I ever could. Page after page bowed inward, curling into black lace before collapsing. The handwriting vanished first. Then the stories. Then the weight. The flames made no sound beyond the low hum of oxygen feeding them. The night was still. A dog barked somewhere down the street. The cicadas sang like they didn't know endings existed. I stayed until the embers glowed low and red, like the last heartbeat of something finished. When it was done, I sat there in the dark a while longer. No music, no applause, just the sound of summer crickets and my own heartbeat syncing with theirs. This wasn't a victory. It was an ending. And for once, it was mine. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.